emergency plan has already been activated. Meanwhile, cities like Philadelphia taking similar action. They're opening up nearly a quarter of their 100 public pools to provide some relief for people.
President Biden and former President Trump hitting the campaign trail to gain support ahead of the 2024 presidential election.
The leading presidential candidates took two very different approaches to campaigning. Former President Donald Trump spent time with black voters in Detroit, where Pastor Lorenzo Sewell said this.
President Obama never came to the hood, so to speak, right? President Joe Biden, he went to the big NAACP dinner, but he never came to the hood. So thank you.
President Biden attended a glitzy fundraiser in Los Angeles, and even though it was headlined by actors George Clooney and Julia Roberts, it was former President Obama appeared to lead Biden off stage that stole the show.
Fox's Ashley Strohmeyer. Latest Fox News poll shows the former president with a lead in Arizona, Florida, and Nevada, and is tied with President Biden in Virginia. The United States temporarily suspending imports from a top producing Mexican state because of a security incident involving staff with the USDA. Spokesman for the USDA says safety inspections are now paused until the security situation is reviewed. Protocols are put into place. I'm Sue Guzman. This is Fox News.
Always here to help you. This island is our home. Through the years, we've been a friend to the neighbors we have known. Now we're banking on the future. Their services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Circle K and Ambrose are turning up the heat with our 80th Liberation Day giveaway. Win big with a fully catered reserved spot at the Liberation Day Parade, plus $2,500 worth of additional prizes, which includes a canopy, chairs, a cooler, and more. Simply purchase select items and enter your My Rewards ID at any Circle K, and you're automatically entered to win. Promo ends July 3rd, so hurry. Don't miss out on this epic celebration. Visit 76circlekguam.com for more info. Must be 21 years or older to win. Enjoy responsibly.
Half a day. Kim Anderson from Security Title here to share some behind-the-scenes functions of a title company. First, we search the chain of title to property, and when a critical link is missing, we work with the owners to correct their ownership. When it comes to a sale, we work closely with realtors and lenders to ensure a smooth closing. Finally, we back up our work with a title insurance policy that guarantees the buyer they actually own the property. Security Title has the management of real estate closings down to a science. Give us a call. We are here to help.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Good afternoon. It is Tuesday in this glorious week of June. You're listening to Tall Tales here on KUSG, and my name is Jose Martinez, your host for the next 2 hours. And your producer for the next 2 hours is Daryl Taggarty. Good afternoon, Daryl.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Welcome to Tall Tales, everybody, our international listening radio audience, as well as those here on the island. We have several things to talk about today in the local scene. There is no Jimmy Cutney, so let's go straight to the card. Systemic racism, use the word, systemic racism is first on the list. We have a column by none other than Jonathan Turley over the faux outrage versus the Alitos. That would be Justice Alito and his wife. Public Law 3634, there was a good number of agendas published in the Guam Daily Post, a good number of them as well, and an offering, a splattering of some that are up on the chopping block to be invalidated due to non-compliance with the open government law. We'll point those out as a public service. That's what we do here on Tall Tales. James Moylan versus reality. When, we don't have anything from Maneko versus Israel, the ongoing saga of the Israeli-Hamas war. Doug versus the Supreme Court of Guam. This is a really, really good one. Perez versus Duenas Part 2. This is where it gets down to brass tacks. Biden's EPA versus Board of Security. We'll finish up that article that I started yesterday before we came to the end of the program. Europe versus socialism, tied into another one called European voters versus the Green Movement. Remember when we were, some of our new lefty freshman senator representatives were trying to push, along with some senators, push this new Green Deal? Well, Europe fell for it, and we'll talk about that. Spain, Norway, and Ireland versus Christians. And then somewhat of a companion piece, because Justice Alito is under fire, or attack, I should say. Attack. They're trying to attack always the left in trying to delegitimize the U.S. Supreme Court. This one is Alito versus abortionists. And then renewable energy versus reliable energy. And then just a little bit of climate facts versus climate myths. First on the card is systemic racism. Here on Tall Tales, we broadcast the program, and we also stream live on social media, facebook.com, youtube.com, and our own website, thepost.gu. Those who are watching the stream can look at your screen and see that we have our esteemed host, Bob Klitzkie, shaking hands with Jeffrey Pleadwell. He was wearing a Tailgaters t-shirt. Jeffrey Pleadwell is the purveyor and the pirate of Jeff's Pirates Cove, located in Ipan, Talofofo. And as well, Jeff's Pirates Cove brings us systemic racism every single day. Today, article or column that was in The Hill, written by Jonathan Turley, talks about an incident where a reporter or an activist infiltrated a fundraising for justices. And we've seen this happen before on the right as well, where people go in posing as somebody they are not to try to obtain information. We've seen Veritas. I know that's the company. I forget who his last name is, James something. And he's no longer with the company, but he's got some really good material going in there and just doing simple cosplay, I guess, and getting this really outrageous information out of people undercover. So this is, I want to keep this in mind when you're reading this, because it is not unknown. I don't think the outrage should be that somebody went in there and tried to trick the Alitos, but that's what happened. In a world of moral relativism, Laura Windsor may reign supreme. The Democratic activist recently lied to justices in order to record answers at a dinner. In an interview with CNN, the filmmaker, who has been lionized by many in the media for her dishonesty, cheerfully explained that she lies to elicit truths that serve the greater public good. The greater good is to contribute to a campaign of harassment and attacks on Supreme Court justices by academics, the media, and Democratic members. The chief target of these efforts lately has been the author of the decision that overturned Roe v. Wade, Justice Samuel Alito. For years, the left has maintained a well-funded, unrelenting campaign against the court and its conservative majority. This has included an effort by such figures as Senator Elizabeth Pocahontas Warren, a Democrat out of Massachusetts, to pack the court immediately with a liberal majority. Warren declared that the court must be packed because it is daring to oppose widely held public opinion. The statement, of course, ignores that the court was designed to resist public pressure and even members of Congress in order to protect the constitutional rights and liberties of minority groups. Unsurprisingly, the usual suspects have assembled again to call for resignations and impeachments after Windsor's surreptitious taping of both Alito and Chief Justice John Roberts. That includes Warren, who declared that Alito is an extremist who is out of touch with mainstream America. His rising power on the Supreme Court is a threat to our democracy. It did not matter that what Windsor captured on her secret recording was neither surprising nor unethical. Pretending to be a religious conservative at a dinner of the Supreme Court Historical Society, Windsor successfully induced the deeply religious Alito to say, wait for it, that he believes the country should return to a place of godliness. Same reaction. It was an otherworldly moment in this notoriously anti-conservative activist asking an unsuspecting Alito why the nation was so filled with rage. In the recording, Alito laments the divisions in the country, stating, "I wish I knew. I don't know. It's easy to blame the media, but I do blame them because they do nothing but criticize us. And so they have really eroded trust in the court. American citizens in general need to work on this to heal this polarization because it's very dangerous." That's all he said. When pushed on what the court can do, Alito again answered honestly, "I don't think it's something that we can do. We have a very defined role, and we need to do what we're supposed to do. But this is a bigger problem. This is way above us." There is nothing even slightly controversial there. But the quote being repeated, often in isolation, was when Alito acknowledged that while there can be of working a way of living together peacefully, it's difficult because there are differences on fundamental things that really can't be compromised. Quote, "They really can't be compromised, so it's not like you're going to split the difference." Warren and others already proved that very point on the left, as do many on the right. Again, this is not at all controversial. We are divided because people hold irreconcilable beliefs on which they are unwilling to compromise. Imagine the reaction of liberals if Justice Sonia Sotomayor suddenly compromised on abortion rights. But pundits and politicians have since lined up feigning vapors at the thought of a justice saying privately that he believed in godliness and had little hopes of compromise on many issues. Warren seemed beside herself with shock, acting as if Alito's bland, obvious observation were some clear sign of political bias. Quote, "I am most concerned about the appearance that Justice Alito has prejudged cases that will come before him. That is one of the biggest sins that a judge or justice can commit." Bear in mind, these are the words of a senator seeking to pack a court with an ideological majority to give predictable rulings on major cases. Likewise, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat out of Rhode Island, declared the tape to be proof that Alito is a movement activist, while Senator Richard Blumenthal, that truth sayer, what is that called when you lie about your service? Stolen valor. I'm going to call him Richard Stolen Valor Blumenthal, a Democrat out of Connecticut, denounced Alito's outrageous behavior. Of course, the lying Democratic activist was not outrageous, but the justice was outrageous in sharing his observation in a private conversation that the nation is irreconcilably divided on major issues. Warren, Whitehouse, Blumenthal, and many of the same pundits were strangely silent when liberal justices such as Ruth Bader Ginsburg engaged in actual partisanship, as when she openly opposed the election of Donald Trump and discussed cases and controversies that might come before her. There was no demand for a resignation when Justice Sonia Sotomayor called upon students to politically oppose pro-life laws after acknowledging, "They tell me I shouldn't." There were no vapors at the thought of justices expressing their political sentiments from the left. Media even cleaned up interviews for liberal justices. Katie Couric famously deleted disparaging comments made by Ginsburg about players kneeling during the national anthem at NFL games, even though that matter could have ended up before the Supreme Court. What is most galling is the pile-on over not just this manufactured controversy, but the earlier controversy over flags. Years ago, one of the best reporters at the WAPO, the Washington Post, investigated a report that the Alitos had flown an upside-down American flag to see if it was a political statement associated with Trump. Robert Barnes interviewed neighbors and concluded that it was not Justice Alito, but his wife, Martha Ann, who had hoisted the flag. Mrs. Alito, he learned, was responding to an ongoing spat with a neighbor. Barnes and the WAPO responsibly decided not to run the story. That type of journalistic restraint is now anathema in our age of rage, with reporters denouncing the Post for failing to run a, quote, blockbuster story. This was then amplified when the public was told that Mrs. Alito had also hoisted at one of their properties the Revolutionary War era Appeal to Heaven flag, which has enjoyed something of a revival since it featured in the introductory sequence of the acclaimed 2008 miniseries on the career of President John Adams. It is not clear how that story was a blockbuster that a justice had a wife with a flag fetish, which includes flying the historic pine tree flag. Tellingly and amusingly, after the left added that flag to its list of Alito's transgressions, Democratic politicians suddenly had to scramble to remove it from their own buildings to clear the way for the outrage. Of course, Windsor also targeted Mrs. Alito in her secret recordings at the dinner. The media again pounced on a line when she complained of feminazis critics and added, "Don't get angry, get even." I'm not trying to pigeonhole females, but I grew up with 3 sisters. My wife is a female. She has female friends. Don't get angry, get even is a phrase you hear often. Men probably do it, but they aren't very vocal about it.
I'm not going to say anything.
I know. I'm not afraid. Don't tell my wife. That statement followed her suggestion that they may sue for defamation and that there's a 5-year defamation statute of limitations. She also added that her husband had tried to keep her from flying her flags and getting into neighborhood spats, but that, quote, "he never controls me." Indeed, she said he had prevailed on her not to fly a Sacred Heart of Jesus flag, but that she was not giving up the ghost, even on that flag. Windsor generously allowed that a Supreme Court spouse certainly has a right to speak, before adding that expected but. Such liberty, she asserted, may not apply to Mrs. Alito when your spouse is one of the most powerful men in the country, you know, with his fingers on the scale, literally, of justice. I mean, are we going to say that we are going to do away with impartiality, the bedrock principle of our democracy, of our jurisprudence? Is it okay? Unquote. Well, the answer is yes, Miss Windsor. It is okay. We do not require justices to divorce outspoken or irrescribable spouses. We do not punish them for speaking freely in private conversations with bottom-feeding gotcha activists who secretly record them at dinners. Justices are even allowed to have strong opinions about controversial issues in dinner conversations. Strong personal opinions do not on their own constitute conflicts of interest. None of this will matter, of course. Democrats will continue to chase Alito around the Beltway like a scene out of The Lord of the Flies. The absurd demands for meetings with justices and threats of subpoenas will continue to thrill liberal voters. It is all part of the threats made by Senate Majority Leader Charles Schumer on the steps of the Supreme Court. Schumer threatened the conservative justices, quote, "You have released the whirlwind and you will pay the price. You won't know what hits you if you go forward with these awful decisions. It is an extension of the pledge by activists to change the court by any means necessary. While thankfully denouncing the attempted assassination of Justice Brett Kavanaugh, liberals have proposed more aggressive targeting of justices at their homes, bribing conservatives to retire, and literally cutting off the justices' air conditioning. That was a thing. As Windsor explained, it is all just for the greater good. Systemic racism, the truth versus the narrative. Go ahead.
How did you get through that whole article without ever mentioning Ginny Thomas?
Who's Ginny Thomas?
Clarence Thomas?
Oh. Because this was about Alito and flags in that article that lady wrote over... But I know that there's also controversy with Ginny Thomas and her alliances with controversial people that the left get butthurt over. But this focus on Alito has to do a lot with his Roe versus Wade decision, or he was the author, and then also because of this get the Supreme Court because they're too conservative rhetoric that's going on right now, which is silly, especially after the two rulings or opinions that we saw, a unanimous decision on the court, and it had to do with the rule of law, not with allegiances to ideals. Even though the bump stock case kind of was about idealism, whether you are for or against the Second Amendment and hurting those who are pro Second Amendment, my opinion. Okay, Public Law 3634. I want to get into the Clarence Thomas thing because I'm going to look more into it. I'm uncomfortable with how she's gone about doing things and the amount of monies that he's received through the years. But I suspect that he's not the only one.
I was only talking about Ginny Thomas being something of a political activist herself. Mm-hmm. And that is her. That is not him.
No.
You don't see that reflected in his
not at all
in his writings.
Yeah.
And so it supports the same point as the article.
That's a good point too. But honestly, I haven't been paying attention to him. He hasn't been really that vocal. She has, not him. Some of his opinions have been. Anyways, I want to move on to this agenda thing because it's really interesting. We go over this every single day, the open government law. And at one time, former Attorney General Levin Camacho had offered classes or seminars, or I don't know what it was, luncheons, closed-door luncheons with no prying activists asking questions, of anybody from agencies or these departments to come and learn about the open government law and how to fulfill or to adhere to, right back then was the newly signed Public Law 3634. And you would think that a lot of them had joined, or maybe there's a new batch of employees or agency heads that are no longer, that don't know these things, that don't know about the open government law. It's really not that difficult, though. We read it every day. We have it right here in front of our hands. Very simple. And you pointed out quite simply that the policy itself, 8102 of the open government law, that says that the people in delegated authority do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know. The people insist on remaining informed so that they may retain control over the instruments they have created. And that's these agencies themselves, and created through the election of our officials. And the way that these public servants can be transparent and open about their activities could be to, when they have a meeting, post their agendas in a newspaper of general circulation, meaning a newspaper which is printed and distributed not less than once a week at regular intervals. So far, the only newspaper of general circulation or newspaper that fits that definition is the Guam Daily Post. So, in other words, anything that is submitted to the Pacific Daily News, and this is not a dig on the PDN. It has a long history, a good history here on Guam, but it doesn't fit the definition of the government, open government law in a newspaper of general circulation. No matter whether you feel you like the Post better than the PDN or the PDN better than the Post, it doesn't matter. The law says it has to be, like I said, I'm going to repeat again, a newspaper of general circulation, which is printed and distributed not less than once a week. And then, as well, when you place these agendas in the newspaper, notices must contain the agenda of matters to be discussed at the respective meeting, and agenda items must be in sufficient detail to put the public on notice as to what is being discussed. That being said, here we have a couple of items from today's Guam Daily Post. The Department of Chamorro Affairs, you have a very detailed Section 3, approval of minutes, and items underneath there. Section 4, President's Report, a number of reports listed under there. Section 5, Old Business, you have 1, 2, 3, but labeled ABC, of what's going to be discussed in Old Business. And then we get to Section 6, New Business, and it's left blank. Is there new business to be discussed? Is there not? Simply leaving it blank is not sufficient detail. It could mean that somebody left something off the page, and that still would be a violation if it was brought up in this meeting. This is going to happen on June 20th, Thursday. The Department of Chamorro Affairs, read the open government law. GETA, the Guam Economic Development Authority, which, and rightfully so, Troy Torres pointed out that they violated their open government law in the open government law by publishing an agenda that did not mention anything that they discussed in a meeting, which they decided to go against a bill to turn the municipal golf course in Dedido into a solar farm. Here, their agenda for a Thursday, June 20th meeting for GETA has a lot of detailed items, but then when you get to item 10, new business, it is left blank. This is now 2 times in a row that you violated the open government law. Department of Education, Division of Special Education, refrain from making jokes here, please. They have completely failed the open government law in putting a detailed agenda. They have a list of items, but they have nothing listed behind them. We don't know what's in the chairperson's report. We don't know if there's any old business, any new business, any announcements. Everything is blank. These meetings are not sometimes easy to get together and hold, and people put a lot of effort in these agendas, but you can't just put something together, throw it, and think that you're going to get by doing the minimal. The open government law is there to protect not just the people and knowing what the government is doing, but protect the people in the agencies and the departments so that you can see that this is what we're supposed to be talking about, and we're not going to get sued, or there's not going to be any litigation, and we're just going to keep perpetuating the same issue because we didn't really inform the people correctly, like Gura, of what we're really going to talk about. And now we're talking about you because you didn't want to be honest with the people, Gura. Here we have Guam Solid Waste Authority Board of Directors regular meeting. And you have a really great agenda until you get down to item number 8, new business, and then nothing after that. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 published agendas that are in violation, clear violation of the open government law, all of them in danger of being nullified for non-compliance. People, you have to do better. There's no please do better or you ought to do better. You have to do better. It's the law. You're listening to Tall Tales here on KUSG. We're going to go to a break. More from the card when we return.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY. And now back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the one radio show politicians don't want you to listen to. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
James Moylan versus reality. James Moylan, our representative to Guam, has been taking his laps of congratulatory exercise of all what he's been doing in Congress, but he's been mighty silent about his efforts, his successful efforts, when he signed on to a letter, almost majority, it was written by Democratic left and far left people signed it, including Representative Grijalva, Delegate Plaskett, Dick Durbin, Jerry Gonads Nadler, AOC, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Pocahontas Warren, and our own Republican representative to Guam, Delegate James Moylan. When they signed a letter to have the Department of Justice disavow the insular cases, well, it's now been 14 days of silence from Delegate Moylan on the Department of Justice rebuking those insular cases, which is why we here have almost all but concluded that Delegate James Moylan just maybe weigh in over his head. Overturning or overruling the insular cases will be detrimental to the island of Guam. Next on the card, Doug versus the Supreme Court of Guam. And I'm going to read this article that came out from the Guam Daily Post. Both newspapers and I think the other media wrote on this, but this is a pretty good, this came out yesterday. This is a pretty good rendering of what's going on here. As you know, the governor asked for the Supreme Court of Guam to give a declaratory judgment on the Attorney General removing himself from most agencies because he is going to be investigating them. And so this, after they did give their ruling, and Doug Moylan was allowed to file a petition. The Supreme Court has allowed it, so I'm going to read this article from the Post. The AG asked the court for a rehearing amid differences of opinion over ruling. A difference of opinion between the governor and the attorney general on the Supreme Court's ruling over the AG's representation of government agencies has resulted in the attorney general requesting a rehearing. Late Friday afternoon, Attorney General Douglas Moylan filed a petition to have the Supreme Court rehear arguments over the duties of the attorney general to executive branch agencies his office is investigating. The rehearing was requested on the basis that particular points of law were overlooked, clarification of which would facilitate proper function of the government of Guam in the future. The expedited nature of this proceeding risks potential oversights that could be mitigated through rehearing, which would allow for a refined opinion which greatly impacts the elected Organic Act office of the Attorney General and its dual function as chief legal officer and public prosecutor, the petition states. The petition presents 5 arguments. The first argument cited a statute adopted by the Guam legislature which limits the creation of confidential communications between agencies and their attorneys. Moylan referenced the open government law. The Guam legislature adopted legislation providing that the formation of public policy and decisions is public and not secret. The petition states, unlike private corporations, which are formed to serve private interests, public agencies are formed and controlled by the people. According to Moylan's petition, 7 statutory requirements must be met to qualify as confidential communications. He listed all 7, and not only that, he listed the Guam Code annotated that are directly related to each statutory requirement. Well, that's what a statutory requirement is. It is the law, or it is in the law. The second argument presented says a broad finding that all constituent communications with the Attorney General are subject to privilege impinges the organic and statutory powers and duties of the Attorney General. Moylan alleged that a clear and unreconcilable divided loyalty is created under the May 31st, 2004 declaratory judgment between the Attorney General's duty and a government official. The third argument says communications from the constituent of an agency to the office of the Attorney General evidencing impropriety are not confidential and must be reported to the Attorney General. In this capacity, the Attorney General is authorized to represent the interests of Guam and its people. And he cites a court case, Fogel versus State. This representation is impeded by a general holding that communications evidencing impropriety from the constituent of a government agency to the Attorney General are confidential attorney-client communications. This is a rule which threatens general mischief, the petition continued. Based on this argument, the Attorney General said, this is clear from the above analysis that there is no expectation of privacy or attorney-client privilege of a government agency or official outside the provisions of the open government law. The fourth argument says the Organic Act and Guam law vests the powers of chief legal officer and prosecution of public officials in the Attorney General. And then the final argument states that the Organic Act does not authorize the governor to appoint an attorney with the powers of the Attorney General, as it allegedly would violate the separation of powers. In its declaratory judgment, the court determined that the governor is qualified to appoint attorneys to, in limited circumstances, serve functions reserved to the Attorney General in the Organic Act and the statutes of Guam. This power is not codified, nor does it exist in the Organic Act. Nothing in law authorizes the governor to delegate the powers and duties of the Attorney General to an independent attorney. Such a power is ultra vires and is solely within the Guam legislature's province, the petition said. The day the petition for rehearing was filed, the governor's office and AG were butting heads over an inquiry by the Guam Daily Post into pending GDOE projects delayed by the issue at hand, which involved the validity of contracts signed by the AG with a disclaimer attached that he is not a personal attorney for the agencies. The governor's office, in their interpretation of the court's ruling, believes that the contracts are invalid because of the disclaimer. Moylan, meanwhile, said he believes the court took no issue with the disclaimer and referenced the Guam Power Authority's ability to proceed with projects despite the disclaimer. In response to questions over the GDOE projects stuck between the governor's office and the AG, Moylan alleged the governor's office was attempting to distract the public from the ongoing investigation into the governor's office and certain cabinet members and agencies launched earlier this year. And then he gave his usual opinion on the governor's press releases, into which the governor responded with her own scathing press release of her opinion. What I appreciate about the AG Moylan is that his petition and his responses are backed by Guam Code annotated, and the governor's is backed by a lot of sarcasm and snarkiness. But, however, when it comes to the Attorney General and the court, who seems to have the most weight in their argument, especially in this petition?
You know, I kind of give that one to the Attorney General, Jose, because he's laid out something that probably doesn't occur to most attorneys who know how the attorney-client privilege works in the private setting. But what Doug is saying is that there can be no confidentiality between government officials and his office. No confidentiality. There cannot be an attorney-client privilege. Now, I'll give you an example. Let's say that you and your child bride go to a lawyer and you're inquiring about a matter of a contract that you've entered into, and the lawyer gives advice that both of you listen to. no attorney-client privilege because the advice was given in the presence of a third party. It has to be just between the attorney and the client and nobody else. So and Doug does a good job of laying out how our government is structured with all of the disclosure requirements. That can't happen. So what it means is this: when one of the assistant attorneys general is counseling a government agency, if in the process of doing that, one of the employees of the government agency gives that assistant attorney general reason to believe that a crime was committed, the attorney general can prosecute, and the government employee cannot use as a defense. The only reason you know about that is because you violated the privilege, because there's no privilege. And of course, Doug has been saying that from the get-go. He's been saying that I revoked all of these SAG, Special Assistant Attorney General tickets, because my office will prosecute government officials who commit crimes. And that's exactly what he's talking about now. So I've read it. I think the Supreme Court went down a rabbit hole when they started thinking in terms of the attorney-client privilege as it would apply in the private context and attempted to apply it in this situation. Of course, I have no use for this whole declaratory judgment process anyhow. And what it's turned out to be is a way for the governor to attempt to curb the powers of the attorney general, where it's supposed to be a means by which either the legislature or the governor determine what their powers are under their own organic legislation. So it's turned out to be a real perversion, and I sympathize with Doug here, having to do all of this stuff.
So a declaratory judgment is something that happens without a court case, without something being brought, without a grievance being brought, like through a court case, a regular court case. So after such a judgment is the term rendered? Or just entered, and there's a petition filed, what comes after a declaratory judgment? A declaratory rejudgment?
Nothing, because, if it's really a judgment, the judgment creditor in a case where there's a real judgment is able to use that judgment to enforce the terms of the judgment. In the civil side, when we're talking about money, let's say A owes B money, A doesn't pay, B sues A, B gets a judgment. When the judgment is docketed, A can get a writ of execution and waltz over to A's bank and levy on A's bank account. The marshal will grab the money and pay it over to B. No, nothing like that enters after these so-called declaratory judgments, because they aren't judgments. And they're not judgments because there's no case or controversy, and there aren't parties. And once again, Doug is not a party to this declaratory judgment. If he's anything, he's a victim, because the governor brought it out. The governor is the one who determines what questions are going to be addressed. And the governor has the upper hand when it comes to dealing with the issues. So we really need to get rid of it like we did once before.
It does. It seems to confuse the matter even more. It definitely muddies the whole situation. And without an arm to, I guess, enforce the opinion offered, it almost feels empty and just a lot of political posturing instead of actual interpretation of the law. In fact, it seemed like Doug Moylan did a better interpretation of the law than the justices did. So we're going to go to a break. You've been listening to Tall Tales here on KUSG. We'll be back with more right after this.
Half a day. Kim Anderson from Security Title here to share some behind-the-scenes functions of a title company. First, we search the chain of title to property, and when a critical link is missing, we work with the owners to correct their ownership. When it comes to a sale, we work closely with realtors and lenders to ensure a smooth closing. Finally, we back up our work with a title insurance policy that guarantees the buyer they actually own the property. Security Title has the management of real estate closings down to a science. Give us a call. We are here to help.
And welcome back. Tall Tales here on KUSG, The Point. Having a little inside conversation here.
Yeah. And did you know that music that played at the beginning of the break? You know that song? Back Home Again in Indiana.
Oh, yeah. That's it's a favorite here on Tall Tales.
From Indiana to Palau.
Yeah, that's a lot of mileage you're racking up there.
We cover it.
Yeah, we can do it. Okay, next on the card is Perez versus Duenas, or Duenas versus Perez, Part 2. Now, as you recall, we had a bit of a breaking news last week when Senator Duenas called in and said that his Bill 175 was indeed voted onto the agenda, the regular session agenda, out of committee, not via the committee, but via the Rules Committee. And I know a little beyond surface level knowledge of the issue at hand about the nitrate. What is it? It's called the nitrate reducing system or septic tanks, and also the controversy with land, dividing them up and building on top of it, and utilities. And I agree, and I get that people have opinions on each side, whether you agree with the EPA or with Senator Duenas or even Senator Perez in her activism. I, for one, am on the side of Senator Duenas' bill in the sense that I believe it's a great bill, it's a good bill, and it's not because people want to make gross amounts of profits off of it. But my opinion doesn't matter, and not so much because it's just Jose's opinion that doesn't matter. I think right now in looking at this with an objective, hopefully, outlook on the situation, nobody's opinion on the issue really matters except for one opinion, and that is, are we going to follow the rule of law, including open government law, and we're going to set standards. Now, I am again in support of 175, but I was kind of troubled because it was relayed to me through our Tall Tales think tank, the legal think tank, and you heard from the legal think tank just a few moments ago. That's very interesting about 175-37 and 51-37 coming out of Senator Perez's committee and onto the floor via the Rules Committee. And I'm going to read to you a number of people who voted to pull the measure out of and put it on the floor. Senator William Parkinson, Senator Roy Kanata, Senator Joe San Augustine, Senator Dwayne San Nicolas, and Vice Speaker Tina Munoz Barnes. All voted, including Senator Tom Fisher, which I'm not including in this group for right now. And then those who voted against bringing the bill, 175 and the other 51, out on the floor were Senator Amanda Shelton and Senator Sabina Perez and Senator Chris Barnett. Senator Joanne Brown also voted against, but I'm not including her in this group. And the reason why I point out these senators is not because they're Democrats and the others I did not put in this group are Republicans. It's because these senators set a precedent a long time ago, well, in this session, in which we have an open government law that also requires the legislature to put on the agenda or publish an agenda what's going to go on the session floor. But the Rules Committee in this session had previously before against the protest, I remember of Senator Chris Duenas, Senator Brown, I want to say even Fisher at the time. I'm not sure how he's been lately, since he seems to take the statement of being rogue into new levels. They were outspoken and outraged over voting items onto the floor without being properly vetted through committee, having a proper committee report given to the Rules Committee to be published before being voted out of committee and onto the floor. That's my only thing that I'm going to talk about here about Duenas versus Perez. It has nothing to do with the issue of these septic tanks. I'm a big supporter of Senator Duenas because I like his platform and I like the way he goes about things, and I think he's very methodical. But in this instance, I would have much better, and it was given to me as a suggestion, this is not my mindset, that let's backtrack a little. This bill has been sitting for a long time in committee. Senator Perez will not let it go out to go on the floor for a vote. She doesn't like it for her reasons, and not so much for anybody else's reasons in the Senate, but her reasons. And so there's no committee report, and there's nothing else that allows it to be brought forward to the floor. It has been suggested that perhaps Senator Duenas could have written his own report to show that there is a report that could be made. It is not because it's sitting immaturely and could not have a report made on this bill to be brought out of the committee and then presented it that way, but still maintain the principles of not bringing things out without a committee report, of not bringing things to the floor without being properly vetted, without bringing things to the floor just because a majority of senators decided they're going to buck the open government law and just bring things on the agenda. Now, I'm not sure if this was Alfred before the agenda was written. I got to look at the timeline of the events, but it still falls into the having to vet bills properly. And that's what this troubles me. I was all for these bills going to the floor, and now I'm a little queasy about it. Based on principle.
You want to hear something that'll make you even more queasy?
No, please. I only have a small bucket.
This process of bringing a bill out, notwithstanding the rules, which they adopted at the beginning of the session of the legislature, it's called, appropriately enough for this particular bill, a discharge petition.
Oh boy. The issue at hand notwithstanding, septic tanks. Thank you, Daryl. And Daryl's not just saying it because he's an expert in discharge. Daryl is saying this.
I can discharge.
Daryl's saying this because you've spent quite a number of years in the legislature.
Yes, doing this in
the background
work, writing committee reports. A large part of my job was writing those committee reports. And yes, the chair of the committee can order the staff to simply don't write the report because the material that you would have to use is not, it doesn't conform with what the chair wants. The facts versus the narrative.
And that's what makes this difficult because, well, if we remained on principle and remained to the same outrage that happened when early on in this 37th, when they started to put things on the session floor without being properly vetted, whether it was a technicality or not, because we needed the integrity of the legislature to adhere to its own rules that they created. This makes it very uneasy to try to put my support behind, not because I don't support 175, but because now seemingly the principled people that I thought were going to save the legislature, you were supposed to save it. You weren't supposed to destroy it. I don't think it's destroyed, but it does put an uneasy spin on what's going on. That being said, there's still a lot of things that need to be corrected, a lot of disinformation that's been placed out there on 175, a lot of wrong, disparaging information. And we'll get back to that in a later time in the week, but right now we're going to the big halftime show. Tall Tales here on KUSG will return with the Tall Tales Tailgaters Rogues Gallery. Don't go away.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Changes in Israel. I'm Ted Lindner, Fox News. Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu has dissolved his war cabinet responsible for making key decisions in the Israel-Hamas war. Fox's Jeff Paul with more.
The disbanding of the Israeli war cabinet comes at a critical time. Not only could it impact a potential ceasefire with Hamas, but the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah along the Israel-Lebanon border is only intensifying. IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari is now warning Hezbollah's increased aggression could bring the region to the brink of a wider war, one that he says could be devastating for not only Lebanon, but the entire region. Rockets recently fired by Hezbollah from Lebanon caused massive fires and damage in northern Israel. Israel, however, has been targeting high-ranking Hezbollah fighters, including killing Commander Taleb Abdullah just last week.
Officials who spoke anonymously say the prime minister will hold smaller forums with some government members for sensitive issues about the war. Celebrations continuing in Boston as the Celtics have won the 23-24 NBA championship over the Dallas Mavericks, 106-88. Fox's Joe Morgan with all the details.
The Celtics took down the Mavericks in 5 games to win the NBA Finals Monday night, capturing their first title since 2008. Boston tore through the NBA playoffs, going 16-3 during the postseason to capture another title. The championship comes after President of Basketball Operations Brad Stevens made big changes to the roster after the Celtics failed to reach the NBA Finals last season. Stevens traded Marcus Smart to the Grizzlies in a 3-team swap that saw them net big man Kristaps Porzingis. Stevens then acquired all-star guard Drew Holiday, sending Robert Williams and Malcolm Brogdon to the Trailblazers. With the victory, Boston has passed the Lakers for the most championships by an NBA organization. Joe Morgan, Fox News.
And overall, it was the team's 18th championship. America's listening to Fox News.
Always here to help you. This island is our home. Through the years, we've been a friend to the neighbors we have known. Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Circle K and Ambrose are turning up the heat with our 80th Liberation Day giveaway. Win big with a fully catered reserved spot at the Liberation Day Parade, plus $2,500 worth of additional prizes, which includes a canopy, chairs, a cooler, and more. Simply purchase select items and enter your My Rewards ID at any Circle K and you're automatically entered to win. Promo ends July 3rd, so hurry. Don't miss out on this epic celebration. Visit 76circlekguam.com for more info. Must be 21 years or older to win. Enjoy responsibly.
President Biden hosting NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg at the White House Monday for a bilateral meeting. The president making an announcement regarding NATO's defense spending.
Record number of allies meeting the NATO commitment to at least 2% of their GDP on defense. And in fact, the number is more than double since we took office, since I took office, and I look forward to building it on all of this progress next month when we have the 75th meeting here in Washington.
And number increasing in large part due to the ongoing war in Ukraine, with several member countries that border Russia hiking up their defense budget since the war started in February of 2022. Stoltenberg with some comments on what the two talked about.
We discussed the upcoming NATO summit here in Washington next month, where we will celebrate the 75th anniversary of the most successful alliance in history, NATO.
And Russian President Putin going to visit North Korea today.
North Korean state media has confirmed Vladimir Putin's first trip to the country's capital for 24 years. Russia's president arrives in Pyongyang tomorrow for a two-day state visit. President Putin's talks with Kim Jong-un are expected to focus on military and scientific cooperation. Their alliance has flourished since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. The US and South Korea have accused the North Koreans of supplying Russia with weapons, possibly in exchange for military technology and aid. Both Pyongyang and Moscow deny this. Jonathan Savage, Fox News.
This as a fleet of Russian warships, including a nuclear-powered submarine, left Havana's port Monday after a 5-day visit to Cuba following planned military drills in the Atlantic Ocean. The exercise has been seen by some as a show of strength by Moscow against the backdrop of tensions as U.S. and other Western nations supporting Kyiv in Russia's war on Ukraine. It's unclear where the fleet is headed next. U.S. officials said days ago, though, they believe the vessels could stop in Venezuela. I'm Ted Lindner, and this is Fox News.
Half a day. Kim Anderson from Security Title here to share some behind-the-scenes functions of a title company. First, we search the chain of title to property, and when a critical link is missing, we work with the owners to correct their ownership. When it comes to a sale, we work closely with realtors and lenders to ensure a smooth closing. Finally, we back up our work with a title insurance policy that guarantees the buyer they actually own the property. Security Title has the management of real estate closings down to a science. Give us a call. We are here to help.
Hi, this is Jerry Roberts. What's happening in the workplace? What about your job and career? What ideas will find their way into your world? That's what you get with The Extra Point every day on The Ray Gibson Show here on 93.3 FM. Sometimes it's about what's in the news, or working relationships, or how to get further and do better. I try to make it interesting, inspiring, and hopefully sneak a little fun in too. Be a part of it. 7:25 weekday mornings. The Extra Point. Brought to you by First Hawaiian Bank.
Tall Tales, the Tall Tales Big Halftime Show. I'm stumbling off my own tongue. It's probably because of this lozenge I took. It kind of numbed it.
But they're
kind of weird.
Yeah, but they're still marching.
Oh, they are still marching. Yeah. I hope they don't stumble on their legs like I stumbled on my tongue.
Not stumbling.
The Tall Tales Big Halftime Show featuring the Tailgaters Rogues Gallery. You know that it's not really that hard to obtain the Tailgaters Rogues Gallery T-shirt. I mean, I'm all over the place right now. The Tall Tales Tailgaters Rogues Gallery is a group of ruffians who got together wearing their tailgater T-shirt and taking
ruffians.
Yeah, ruffian. They're not Russians. Ruffians.
There are a few that don't look like ruffians.
There are ruffians. Don't be fooled by their calm demeanor, their pretty faces, their scruffy faces. That is a ruffian feature. Tailgaters, let's start this all over. You too can become a Tall Tales Tailgater Rogues Gallery member by pointing your browser to the point.gu. That's the official website of this radio station. There is a picture of a beard sporting the T-shirt, the very same T-shirt you see in the Rogues Gallery. Behind that picture is a link to the website where you can order the shirt. When it arrives, put it on, take a selfie. Or if you don't know how to take a selfie, have someone take one for you. Make sure that you're in the frame. And then when that picture develops, remember when we used to develop photographs? When that picture arrives, send it to the Point WhatsApp number at 671-797-8255, and you too can become a part of the Tailgaters Rogues Gallery. It's that simple.
No beard required.
No beard required at all. Except I probably would put preference and place you to the front of the line if you did have one. But that's just me. You know, before we left the first hour and get to the big halftime show, I was talking about Bill 175 and 51 making it to the session floor, but made it more about the principle of how it got there, the process involved. But I do want to make one very strong opinion to the Guam Daily Post. Your bias couldn't be more obvious. I can see why Senator Duenas is frustrated over this whole process and why it led him to do something like this, although I don't agree with the method of which it was brought to the floor, because of all the disinformation and biased information that's put out there. And I know that we can't depend on our newspapers to be objective anymore, because you see what they print. You see the types of article that's printed when it's not local news. But here we have an article that could have delved into the issue, that could have went to both sides and talked about it, but it seemed like you only wanted to have, I have 6 pages of just denigrating this whole issue by only talking to Paris, by only getting all the disparaging talks about what 175 would bring. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't put that kind of stuff in there, but at least get a balanced view of why this bill is so controversial. There's a reason why. And there's a reason why Senator Chris Duenas has been frustrated. Even your poll was misleading. It was a loaded question in the poll asking people, do you agree with safe drinking water or wanting to pollute for the future of our children? That's basically what they said.
That's bias.
I'm not saying that that's the word for word, but that's what I took it as. And a lot of people that took it as well. It was no way to, it's like, so did you get caught beating your wife? There's no going past that. Right now we have Frenchie on the line.
He has a beard.
Yes, he does. And a very foreign accent that some people swoon over. Not me. Frenchie, I forgot how to press buttons. Frenchie, good afternoon. Welcome to Tall Tales.
Yeah.
You want to talk about septic tanks?
I wanted to also point out that you forgot one of the women in your life who's probably the most important.
Uh-huh.
And it's your mother.
Oh. I'm not going to.
And God knows your mother is a lovely woman. Right?
Yes,
So,
very much so.
You better not disagree.
I do not ever, would never, and have never.
All right. So I wanted to put my grain of salt on Bill 175. I think it's number one. I think we need to agree on two things. As an island, we need two things in order for us to prosper. One is we need to have abundant, affordable energy supply that is consistent in delivering energy that is less expensive than it is now. All right. The other is that we need a safe water supply that is available to everybody. And short of that, we cannot sustain life on an island. And this is a major issue. And I've talked since Saturday, Sunday, Monday, even today, with several of the people that are involved in the kerfuffle that we have seen coming out of this. And I also was made aware of the lack of following the rules in the legislature. But I think what I have analyzed is this. Chris' bill is not a bad bill in itself, but it doesn't address the real issues. And Perez's bills, same thing. And they come at it from two different perspectives, and they are both missing the boat. The reason is this. The main reason we have issues with our water supply is not even the problem of septic tanks, because we could probably come up with a solution, but we need to have an overall solution island-wide with the water system. And right now we're doing piecemeals. And we're trying to please everybody, especially multi-generational family properties where people want to keep on building. And so you go from 1 acre, half an acre, a quarter of an acre, 1/8 of an acre. And so Chris Bill trying to address the problem with the phosphates. But, you have a lot of other pollutants in the water. You have sulfates, you have fluoride, you have manganese, you have arsenics, you have heavy metals. And the main reason we have all those issues, and this is one thing that Mrs. Perez doesn't want to bring forward, is the catastrophic management of CLTC lands, where people that are being given leases there cannot even afford to put a septic tank on their properties. So what they do is that they build hot houses. There is no filtering. There is nothing. There is a huge, unbelievable. If you want to take Swamp Road one day, it's only 1.5 miles long. It's a huge issue of illegal chop shops where they have acids, heavy metal, and everything. And this is swept under the rug, right? So come into this, the political game. And I think, and so there is an issue between several of the Republicans, and are not getting along, and I'm afraid it might take how would you say that, a personal development that would not be beneficial to the Republicans or to the island as a whole. So I have advocated to all the different people that I have talked to that they need to find a way to cool down and try to find a common way, maybe to table it until the next legislature, but to have a overall approach where no lease to the CLTC will be given unless there are water pipes going there and sewer lines. And same thing with the new buildings. We need to come in the 21st century. We're no longer there. Another issue is that GWA needs to invest $1 or $2 billion, not million, $billion in refurbishing their sewer lines, which are broken. You know, we live in an earthquake area.
Yep.
We need to find materials that are better than the ones we have now, and we need to reinvest in doing that. Then, of course, you have huge problem between GWA and the Korean company at the water treatment center. Now, we were given a special delay by the federal EPA to finish this thing, and then right now it's going to cost us dozens and dozens of millions of dollars because people didn't cross their T's and dotted their I's. This is mismanagement at all levels, which predates Lou Leon Guerrero, but Lou Leon Guerrero has done absolutely zero, nothing, nada, zilch, to try to solve those issues. She has been sitting on the thumbs, and she's counting to see who is going to go after who. And so what I'm afraid right now is that she has done one of those mouse traps again, where the Republicans are going to fight each other on an issue which is sitting on the governor's lap, and she is pushing certain agenda versus others' agenda, while none of the people that are coming with temporary solution is bringing a whole approach to the solution. It's going to need to be done, and it's not by giving 25% pay increase to every government employee that we're going to solve it. We need to find the money to update our system. On top of it, we're getting close to 45,000 Marines and their dependents. The military is doing what needs to be done, but the civilian authority are not doing what needs to be done. And that includes Beijing Perez, and that includes also Chris. I'm afraid I disagree with this. Now, I've exchanged with
I
him.
declared that last week as well. That's very valid.
I disagree with him. I let him know. I cannot reveal everything we talked about, but I think we need to have a much macro approach. There are people on the island that understand the problem and know how to solve them, but they are not brought to the table. And some of the biggest culprits, CLTC, especially CLTC, but also the Bureau of Land Management, are not doing their job. Now, in this case, the Guam EPA actually did their job, which was to warn the general public that we are facing dire consequences if we do not address this problem. Yet, if we're on an island, if we cannot have water, which was the main reason the Spaniards stopped on Guam on their trip to Acapulco, right, was because we had fresh water. If we no longer have fresh water that can sustain the population, I'm not worried about it. They will have water treatments and everything, but we will not, because our civilian administration is just able to give pay raise to people that do not know how to do the job, and they are afraid to take the bull by the horn because they are either too lazy or too inept. And in the case of Lou Leon Guerrero, she's both. She's too lazy and too inept, and the only thing that counts for her is setting traps for the opposition that the next generation of Democrats can stay in power, and God protects us if that ever happens. So that's it's an example of the necessity for us to have good representation in the legislature and to have good people in government, and not to pack up government with people that are not able to do their jobs and pay them 20% extra or 25%, or like former governor, what's his name at GVB, go from 125 to 160,000 a year.
Amazing.
For what?
Amazing.
For what? Please, somebody explain.
Can I just opine something real quick, Frenchie? This really cracked me up. A lot of people are justifying it by saying, and that's just a little bit of what Hawaii makes. And I'm saying to myself, I do not think Gutierrez is shopping around for other travel or tourism agencies to work at. He's not.
He wants to stay on Guam.
It doesn't matter what other people are paying. That's not the case or matter here. It just was profane. But that was just my little opine.
If you look at social media, I don't think you had many people supporting this.
Nope.
So, but this is where we are, and
it hurt. It hurt a lot of people.
800-pound gorilla in the room is the CLTC, that is inept, corrupt, and racist, and they are hiding behind excuses not to come up with a solution, or not. They are afraid to go to the legislature and say, hey, this is what needs to be done. They have not even done that. They are just doing pie in the skies on city projects like the golf course and other things, and they are running after 6 rabbits at the same time, and they are not going to catch one. You know, that's a major problem that we are facing in the next 10 years. No matter if we get a good legislature at the end of the year or not, the problems are not going to go away. And we can see how a poor legislator has huge impact when you see the impact that Clint Richdale had on pushing for solar energy, pushing, delaying Okudu's beginning of work, and scrapping a new turbine in PD. And then now
all for a sole agenda.
People are not blaming Clint Richdale. People like blaming GPA, and GPA was at the mercy of a hack.
They were warning us a long time about this, and we allowed that senator to just push his own agenda. And
guess where he is now, making a six-figure salary, right? He's at Adelup.
It was awarded.
So,
yeah,
he was
rewarded
for screwing up the whole electrical grid.
Yep.
So this is where we are, and I just want people to start realizing the issues we're facing, and I want the Republicans like Chris and Joanna Brown and everything to start talking to each other again, make peace, and come up with a plan for the future, but don't try to hit each other. That's not going to bring anything. It's going to make you lose the election in November, and this is it. And then, of course, I can reveal that. No, I cannot say it.
Maybe another program.
That would have been fun, but it's part of a private conversation. But you know,
you can't do that. You can't just say you have something to say and then not say it.
Yeah,
tell me later.
I know. But there's one thing also we have to be very careful, and that goes back to some of the shows you're playing sometime and everything. It's the urban legend or the island legend of the poor Chamorro versus the rich colonizer. The richest person on island is Lou Leon Guerrero. She's a billionaire, right? And she's doing what for the Chamorros? Nothing. Is she having a foundation to try to help poor Chamorros build homes? No, she doesn't. So stop this nonsense. Stop dividing people based on race line and income. There is a reason why people outside of government are very low income. It's because we do not attract the right industries. And the industries we have here, we are mismanaging them, and then we reward the people mismanaging them with increase of salaries. So, you know, we have to stop doing this. It's very destructive. And it's not going to be a solution on the long run if Chamorros want to keep their children on the island rather than being part of the diaspora in the U.S. from Texas to California to Washington State and North Carolina.
Everywhere.
The reason people are there is because they can make a real living.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of them come back to retire on Guam because they have a family house.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have health issues and everything, you think twice about coming to retire on Guam.
All right, Frenchie, you've spilled a lot, and you still protected the drinking water. So I applaud you for that. That wasn't discharge.
I think we really have to have a coordinated approach rather than a piecemeal. And even if the intentions are good, the results will be that we are sweeping part of the issue under the rug and we're not addressing the real issues.
Well, hopefully, I don't know. I'm not going to hedge everything on just pure hope. I understand and I appreciate activism, and I appreciate people with high opinions and with lofty ideals, but back it up with something other than old science or just plain rhetoric rather than facts. I mean, because after a while, the rhetoric just gets the same.
The rhetoric is the same, and I was doing some research about anything regarding the water supplies.
Mm-hmm.
I ran into a paper which was written by an undergraduate about the problem of water in northern Guam. And that nice student who was helped by a graduate student with a master's degree was basically blaming the whole issue on climate change.
Oh,
so,
boy.
On one side you have the boogeyman is the military and the climate change, and on the other side is, we cannot develop because that's going to benefit rich white people. So
it's just annoying. All right, thank you very much, Frenchie, for that one.
You're welcome.
Okay, and I look forward to your next call. I do want to do something on China and Taiwan maybe in the next couple of days, so please tune in and chime in when that happens.
Yeah.
Very good stuff. All right.
There are a few things, but why not?
All right, have a great afternoon. We'll talk to you soon. You're listening to Tall Tales here on KUSG. We're going to go to the 7th inning stretch. Wrigley Field. Don't go away.
Kami ang inyong bangko na tapat sa serbisyo. Tunay na kaibigan at handa para sa inyo. Ang bangko ng kinabukasan, laging maaasahan. Pan Pacific, where others dug branches, we place roots.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
The 7th inning stretch, 2 more innings left before we head to Churchill Downs and the home stretch. Let me clear my throat there. I almost lost my voice there. Okay, we're going to go to the national stage right now and talk about them. What's happening over in Europe needs to be observed by everybody because it is eerily similar to the mindset of some of our government policies that are coming out of the out of Washington, D.C., some of these mandates, some of these pushes, and it's not because it's a coincidence. These are things that have been long in the making, trying to unify a lot of efforts worldwide, a one world type nation, starting with the green movement, and that has to do with eliminating fossil fuels, carbons, all for a utopia type planet.
Oh, I thought you were talking about colonialism.
Ooh, that's such an old ancient word.
Yeah, but it's worldwide.
It's worldwide. This one is even more worse because it's colonialism on a different level, in which it comes and says that we're here to save you and we know better than you, but all it is a heavy application of the thumb of the administrative state, just telling you how to live, telling you what to buy, telling you and forcing you to be a certain way and to live your life a certain way. It's almost worse than a religious state. It almost became a religion. It is a religious state if you look at it. And I'm talking about the green movement. There's nothing wrong. Again, this is talking about not going to extremes. There's nothing wrong with minding the environment, being conservative, conservation, being mindful of pollution, being mindful of trash. But when you start to subsidize programs based on what you think the best way to practice is and force everybody to do it, you're going to get pushed back. Especially when you mix everything together with social issues, like Frenchie gave the example of the student's paper talking about clean drinking water and colonialism and other things, factors that really have barely any bearing on the matter. I started reading this yesterday. I'm going to start from the beginning just so that we don't lose our place. Look who the EPA is funding now. The Inflation Reduction Act money is paying groups that want to abolish ICE. ICE is the enforcing immigration policing agency. The Inflation Reduction Act is the political gift that keeps on giving, especially if you're a lobby for progressive causes. We recently told you that the Environmental Protection Agency handed IRA, Inflation Reduction Act money, to an outfit backing anti-Israel protests. It turns out the EPA is also funding groups that oppose immigration enforcement. That's the latest discovery by West Virginia Senator Shelley Moore Capito's office, which is probing IRA spending. The law appropriated $3 billion for environmental and climate justice block grants. The APA is supposed to select grant makers and partner organizations to spread around the largesse. EPA tapped Fordham University as a grant maker to distribute $50 million in collaboration with the New York Immigration Coalition and the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice. What does immigration have to do with climate? Nothing, though progressives say the issues intersect in the oppression of minority groups. According to the EPA, Fordham and its partners will take an intersectional approach to place frontline communities in position of power to advance climate justice in disadvantaged and hard-to-reach communities and communities disproportionately impacted by climate change, pollution, and other environmental stressors. What the heck does that even mean? Perhaps abolishing immigration and customs enforcement, the ICE, which is what NYIC advocates. NYIC condemned ICE as racist and abusive at a member Congress in January. The group this month rallies with Democrats in Albany for a bill to prohibit local law enforcement from working with ICE. After President Biden's election, the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice called for ending all ICE transfers and all forms of incarceration in New York and New Jersey. Does that count migrant criminals, including Venezuelan gang members who prey on the innocent? NJAIJ boasts that its New Jersey policy victories include state cash assistance for undocumented immigrants and a ban on local government contract renewals with ICE. As Mr. Biden tough talks on border security, his EPA is funding groups that are seeking to undermine immigration enforcement. It's no surprise that IRA money is being misspent, but we can't help wondering whether the administration is trying to fund the resistance to a future Trump administration. They're looking at it from the purview of this is political and a Biden versus Trump. And I'm looking at it as a waste of our dollars, even though we don't pay into the federal taxes.
No, we don't. We keep it.
We keep that, but it still affects us as well because those policies bleed here into the United States, into Guam as well. So now what does this have to do with Europe? Just a couple of days ago from Brussels Signal, remember that periodic or that website I've introduced, I hopefully introduced to people. I'm sure other people have read it before. It's a brand new, so to speak, agency that talks commentary on a lot of things that have to do with the European Union in Brussels. Europe, the title of this is Europe, over-regulated, overtaxed, and falling behind. Let us look first at Europe, which just had these elections, and then we will look at the political results. Europe today is a continent crumbling under the weight of massive over-regulation and over-taxation. It consistently lags the United States in employment, entrepreneurship, innovation, and growth. For years, politicians in the European Union have shut down nuclear power plants, which produce clean, low-cost, and safe energy, closed coal plants, and banned natural gas exploration, hurting the business and industry in the name of so-called green energy. In geopolitical terms, the EU is incoherent with rash and ineffective foreign policies without any clear goals and lacking a clear vision for this century. Yet, these are mere aspects of one overarching theme. Europe is being destroyed from within in the name of a greater good that impoverishes the ordinary citizen and enriches the expanding bureaucracy in Brussels and the EU capitals. All of which drove the voters to turn to the right. Resistance to the Green New Deal, war, and ever-rising cost of living, and illegal immigration all drove the weekend's elections for the European Parliament. These are not the United States issues, but they're eerily similar to what's going on with us because of this one world view that happened probably around maybe right before Obama came into office with Mercon. Who else was elected into
One
that?
world view?
One world view.
No, it
Green
goes back,
view.
It goes, green view.
The one green view.
Not the coordinated world government.
That was Bush. That was
or League of Nations.
Right. That's true, which no longer exists. Kinda.
Then there's the UN.
There you go. Voters turned to the right in the UN. Resistance to the Green New Deal, war, ever-rising cost of living, and illegal immigration all drove the weekend's elections for the European Parliament. It is an indisputable fact that the voters across the continent have made their will quite clear, not only in these elections, but in national ones as well during the past few years. The voters have sent to Brussels a strong signal. They want the European People's Party, the EPP, the dominant center-right group in the parliament, to work with other conservative groups and find a way to save Europe. They have even forgiven the EPP's dalliances with the far left, the green lunacy, and the attack on the farmers, choosing to believe the U-turn that the EPP made on green issues as the election neared. In all European countries, socialists, liberals, and the Greens have been voted down, whereas the center-right, conservative, and right-wing parties have seen their numbers grow. Farmers, the middle class, small and medium entrepreneurs have shown their unequivocal rejection of the madness that is called the Green New Deal and all the policies associated with it, hence the decline in left-of-center parties. Europe has waged war on traditional energy sources without having the renewable alternatives to meet the demand levels. This is coupled with fiscal repression that has made the EU dependent on Russia and non-ally countries for energy, and that affects national security. That's like Germany, Germany has what, 70, almost 80% reliance on energy from Russia? That's amazing. Furthermore, voters have shown that they want safe borders, law and order, and an effort to protect our heritage, traditions, and customs, clearly rejecting wokeism and other forms of cultural Marxism. There is a danger, though, because some of these far-right groups are very, what's the word called when you're very strongly for your country? I can't think of that word term now. I'll think of it later on tonight in my sleep. Not just anti-immigration, but it does tinge on the racism part. It's not racism, though. You know what I'm talking about, Daryl?
Nationalism? Yeah,
it's a word. It's a simple word, though, that of course I can't remember. Anyways, back to the article. For more than a decade, the union has been at crossroads. Either it will be destroyed by the arbitrary decisions of unelected and unaccountable bureaucrats, or be reformed to be more in line with what the founding fathers had envisioned. There can be no other way, mostly because all the member states have allowed the union to fall into decay while pretending things were right. That also sounds like Canada, our northern neighbor. They are suffering big time. We're going to go to Churchill Downs and take a break, and we'll back with more on this article of the erosion of the overregulated, overtaxed European voters.
Half a day. Kim Anderson from Security Title here to share some behind-the-scenes functions of a title company. First, we search the chain of title to property, and when a critical link is missing, we work with the owners to correct their ownership. When it comes to a sale, we work closely with realtors and lenders to ensure a smooth closing. Finally, we back up our work with a title insurance policy that guarantees the buyer they actually own the property. Security Title has the management of real estate closings down to a science. Give us a call. We are here to help.
Always here to help you. This island is our home. Through the years, we've been a friend to the neighbors we have known. Now we're banking on the future. Their services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Churchill Downs, the home stretch, just a few more moments left in this episode of Tall Tales. We're here reading about from a report on Brussels' signal of the overregulated, overtaxed, and falling behind European Union and the peoples in those regions, in those countries. Those are the national elections they're talking about, the European elections also, where the left or left-of-center groups are losing its validity amongst the people because of everything just going to bunk. The word I was thinking of, Daryl, xenophobia. That's a fear of foreigners. And, you know, it could also be used as a pejorative in the sense of someone who wants to regulate immigration, which I have no problem with. It ought to be that way, is sometimes tagged as a xenophobe as well, which is not true. It just means that, you know, we're full. We can't afford or sustain any more people coming in, or else we're going to bust as well. Financially, society, it's just It just is what it is. But that's some of the dangers of some of these far right-wing groups in the European Union, is the xenophobia that was kind of the swan song of the Germans in several other countries. And some people claim that, yeah, you know what, there's other countries that are like that too. Japan can be considered xenophobic. China sometimes, although I've seen many people from China and Japan really love it when Westerners attempt to emulate. Here in the States, we call it cultural appropriation, and there it's a sign of respect sometimes to wear their garb and to celebrate their culture. But I digress. We're going back to Europe right now. Europe has waged war on traditional energy sources. I read that. Furthermore, voters have shown they want safe borders, law and order, and an effort to protect their heritage, traditions, and customs, clearly rejecting wokeism and other forms of cultural Marxism. For more than a decade, the Union has been at crossroads. Either it will be destroyed by the arbitrary decisions of unelected and unaccountable bureaucrats, or be reformed to be more in line with what the Founding Fathers had envisioned. There can be no other way, mostly because all the member states have allowed the Union to fall into decay while pretending things were right. European citizens are screaming this every chance they get, through their votes, protests, or civil unrest. The reaction and the solution cannot come from the left, since it is the cause of such misery inflicted on the old continent. Voters have chosen right-of-center parties once again to rise to the height of the historic moment and show a way back to prosperity and sanity. Across Europe, socialist, green, and liberal parties, disconnected from reality due to the false sense of security that being the everlasting establishment gives you, have seen massive declines. Undoubtedly, the continent has shifted rightwards, with citizens believing conservative, common-sense solutions are needed to save their homes, communities, and countries. There is just one path to enact lasting positive change for the EU citizens. It is up to the EPP, as the largest group on the center-right, to rise above the obvious differences and offer a historic accord to the conservatives and reformists, and to identity and democracy, and even to reasonable classic liberal groups. As expected, it was the first instinct of bureaucrats in the leadership of the EPP to turn to their socialist and liberal establishment allies and disregard their own voters. It would be foolish, a historic mistake even, to continue with business as usual and ignore what voters want. The vote on at the weekend went in the opposite direction of the current ruling coalition in Brussels. If the EPP keeps ignoring the issues that conservative voters care about, the right-wing wave in the next elections will become a tsunami, which will take not only socialists and far-left radicals, but the EPP itself. The EPP should understand that they are the creators of what they call the extreme right. As the EPP moved left, there was a vacuum on the right that had to be filled. A considerable number of voters on the right were left politically orphaned. The more the centrists collaborated with the left and the far left, the more frustrated voters had to look elsewhere. And this led to the creation of conservative and right-wing parties, which simply were more vocal, but in essence espoused the same values and principles as the former conservative EPP before it moved left. And meanwhile, the left moved even further left, becoming more radical and aggressive. The voters overwhelmingly want a change in this. They want an EPP at the helm of a conservative alliance that enacts change. The difference between conservative groups are many, but I believe what unites the right is bigger than what divides it. President Reagan managed to form a coalition spanning from libertarians to traditional conservatives, fiscal hawks, and anti-communists, and managed to provide a model that proved successful. European right-of-center groups should unite on the basis of several common principles, including respecting the rule of law and stopping any type of lawfare, ensuring individual freedom against any type of violations from the government, working towards limited influence from Brussels, free and fair markets, low taxes, and deregulation to release the immense potential in European entrepreneurship. A whole bunch of other stuff they added there. Decline is a choice. It is not inevitable. I believe a healthy majority in these parties and even Renew would agree with these principles, which echo what libertarians hold dear and what conservatives and identitarians believe in. The right should be proud of its values and history. A great union of the right is what the left fears and what the people are seeking. Reject the first with abhorrence and embrace the latter's call for a historic decision. Otherwise, Europe will end up a sad story of the 21st century, powerless to prevent its own fall, unable to influence world affairs for the first time in the past 2,000 years. The ball is in the EPP's court. Let us encourage them to act responsibly and historically. Well, the rest of that article was just rhetoric, pure rhetoric about what needs to happen. But I read it going, are they writing this about the United States elections and the campaign season? Because a lot of it was very familiar, not just because they used the words left and right, but because of what's been happening with people being able to afford things, being able to live their lives without having wokeism thrown in their face. Just the green agenda alone, I'm not going to read this next article. It is kind of lengthy, but it pretty much echoed a lot, but used a lot more specifics in the policies that were happening over there in the European Union. That's the other number one things, and similar to what we're talking about here in the States, and Guam's affected as well, is immigration, is the economy, especially environmental policies. And then these fundings of the wars right now that are going on that they're not really a part of in Ukraine, in Israel and Hamas right now. These are real things that people are saying, hey, what are we doing here? We're not even, are we entering something that we're not asking to enter into? Who's pulling the strings? And right now, the people that are in charge is the ones are being viewed as pulling the strings right now.
The ones we elected?
The ones we elected. The ones we are hoodwinked into electing.
The ones who represent us.
Right, very well. And unfortunately, they represent more of an administrative state, policy-driven bureaucrats, rather than those who were chosen to lead by law and to represent us. I am such a big fan of this open government law policy, and when it specifically states out what the role of a public servant is. We're not looking to people to be slaves, but we're not looking to people to tell us how to live and what to do, especially through these policies. And I mean, the EPA already has thrown so much at us, demanding how our energy is supposed to be here on this island, that it's definitely changed the way we do business with energy. Frenchie is back on the line. I know. I was chumming the waters, Daryl.
I know.
I hope that I'm not saying that you're a shark, Frenchie. I'm just saying that I knew there was fresh meat for you to latch onto.
Under Paris.
Yeah. I won't take much time because it would need a 4-hour dissertation.
There's a lot. Yes.
The article you read is a Boston, New York, DC centric view of Europe, which is on top of it.
That's why it sounded familiar.
Very hypocritical, because most of the issues that are happening right now in Europe are directly tied to the Democrats in DC. And so it would take too much time to develop this thing, especially after such a long article. Mm-hmm. But let's say it's a lot more complex, a lot more complicated than this article wants it to make it. It's more geared towards our election, like you said, which is putting the right against the left and so on. But it's really not all about that at all. And a lot of the issues that Europe is facing right now go back on the short term 2 years ago, and on the long term back to 1918. So, but yeah, I had to say something.
I just put so much into that, and you just put a needle in it. I understand what you're saying. That's why I was saying it sounds very familiar. And the suspect part was when he when he invoked Ronald Reagan. And I know a lot of people know who Ronald Reagan is in Europe.
They always blame the dead guy, and actually Ronald Reagan was very offhand when he came down to Europe because he had some good advisors.
Oh yeah, I'm sure he did.
That understood Europe. But right now, all the advisors that we have in D.C. are
inept.
Their families come from Eastern Europe. They are Russophobic, and I made a Francism. And they have a very
Frenchie.
narrow agenda, which has nothing to do.
We have to say goodbye to our president, though.
Yeah, okay.
We'll pick this up tomorrow, though. Okay. So everybody on. Oh, I don't even know where my camera is. Anyway, there it is. Let's go, Brandon. All right.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Beefing up security. Fox News, I'm Sue Guzman. President Biden playing host to NATO's Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg at the White House Monday with a bilateral meeting there.
Under your leadership, we made it larger, stronger, and then it's more united than it's ever been. So I want to thank you, Mr. Secretary General, for the incredible work you've done.
The two leaders announcing that the number of allied countries spending at least 2% of their GDP on defense has doubled since President Biden took office. The number has increased in large part because of the ongoing war in Ukraine. Russian President Putin's arrived in North Korea for the first time in 24 years before departing for Pyongyang. Putin penned an op-ed thanking North Korea for its contribution to Russia's war efforts in Ukraine. The United States is expressing concerns about the ongoing meeting, which appears designed to deepen relations between Russia and North Korea. House Speaker Mike Johnson meets with former President Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago Monday. Fox's Chad Pergram on Capitol Hill tells us that the two Republicans discussed top issues in the 2024 campaign.
GOP leaders believe aligning with former President Trump is essential in order to hold the House and win the Senate. Otherwise, they cannot accomplish anything. Today marked the second pilgrimage to Mar-a-Lago by Johnson in 2 months. Here are the GOP's major agenda items: re-upping the expiring Trump tax cuts. The GOP could lean on a special Senate process to avoid a filibuster to pass that. There will also be a focus on border security. Republicans say a porous border puts the U.S. at risk. But Democrats scoff at suggestions that former President Trump and Republicans are interested in governing at all.
Johnson writing on X, he's confident they will send the former president back to the White House and Republicans will win both houses of Congress in November. America's listening to Fox News.
The world of business moves fast. Stay on top of it with the Fox Business Rundown every Monday and Friday. Fox Business reporters, anchors, and hosts will bring you beneath the stock market speculation and boardroom drama to tell you about the biggest business stories of today. Whether you're on Main Street or Wall Street, Fox Business is invested in you.
Listen to the Fox Business Rundown every Monday and Friday at foxbusinesspodcasts.com or wherever you download your favorite podcasts.
It's time to take the quiz. 5 questions, 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week.
History, pop culture, science, sports, civics. How much do you know? Let's find out.
Who was the first person to walk on the moon?
Jackson or something?
Neil Armstrong.
Take the quiz every weekday at thequiz.fox and then listen to the quiz podcast to find out how you did.
Play, share, and of course, listen to the quiz right now at thequiz.fox.
They're celebrating in Boston.
Banner number 18 has been secured. The Celtics are NBA champions.
as the Celtics defeat the Dallas Mavericks 106-88 to win the NBA Finals 4-1. That's ABC's Mike Breen on the call. Record high temps bringing intense heat all this week to cities across the U.S. Fox Weather's Nicole Valdez telling us.
The Midwest feels the burn first with highs soaring up to the upper 90s. That includes places like Chicago. The Windy City on Father's Day reached a whopping 95 degrees, already the hottest day of the year so far. And as this heat wave moves into the Northeast, it could get even worse. A heat advisory expected for the Big Apple later this week. New York Mayor Eric Adams announced in a press conference New York City will be opening up its cooling centers tomorrow, and the city's emergency plan has already been activated. Meanwhile, cities like Philadelphia taking similar action. They're opening up nearly a quarter of their 100 public pools to provide some relief for people.
President Biden and former President Trump hitting the campaign trail to gain support ahead of the 2024 presidential election.
The leading presidential candidates took two very different approaches to campaigning. Former President Donald Trump spent time with black voters in Detroit, where Pastor Lorenzo Sewell said this.
President Obama never came to the hood, so to speak, right? President Joe Biden, he went to the big NAACP dinner, but he never came to the hood. So thank you.
President Biden attended a glitzy fundraiser in Los Angeles, and even though it was headlined by actors George Clooney and Julia Roberts, it was former President Obama appeared to lead Biden off stage that stole the show.
Fox's Ashley Strohmeyer. The latest Fox News poll shows the former president with the lead in Arizona, Florida, and Nevada, and is currently tied with President Biden in Virginia. I'm Sue Guzman. This is Fox News.
Is KFC's new pizza?
Fried chicken? That's our pizza.
That's right. You think KFC's new pizza isn't pizza because it's made with crispy fried chicken? You think the marinara, mozzarella, and pepperoni aren't enough? Well, you're right. It's not pizza. It's chizza. Only at KFC.
Now on Guam for a limited time, the new KFC Chizza. Grab yours today at your favorite KFC restaurant or order at kfcguam.com. KFC, it's finger-licking good.
Hi, I'm Smokey Bear, and I made an assistant to help you out, because only you can prevent wildfires.
Hey, Assistant Smokey Bear. Call me Papa Bear, because I'm grilling up dinner. Do you get it?
Yes, good job.
So, what should I do with all these coals?
Don't just toss them out. Put them in a metal container because those embers can start a wildfire.
I understand. The stakes are high.
Ha, 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 ha.
Learn more at smokeybear.com.
Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Well, we're coming to your city. Gonna play our guitars and sing you a country song. We'll all be flying higher than a jetliner. And if you want a little bang in your yin-yang, come along.
There's tremendous unity in the Republican Party. We want to see just success for our country.
All Americans, both those who are well off and those who are near at the bottom of the income distribution, are better off now. Their wages have risen.
Why has he not done an executive order on the border? To me, that is kind of such a no-brainer.
Because he listened to the left. All right, every time you listen to the left, you're screwed.
The clock is ticking. There's only 140 days until America votes.
Yeah, we're coming to your city. Gonna play our guitars and sing you a country song.
From coast to coast. From border to border. From sea to shining sea. Sean Hannity is on.
And thank you, Scott Shannon, and thanks to all of you for being with us. 800-941-SEAN if you want to be a part of the program. 140 days to go until Election Day. 91 days until early voting begins. And we're only 10 days away from the first presidential debate, and nothing is going on. These are interesting times that we're living in. We're going to go over a lot of poll numbers today. There's something that is happening in the country demographically that is very, very real. Even fake news CNN is acknowledging it. We'll get to that. And I think what's happening, in spite of all of the pressure of everybody to talk about Donald Trump and lawfare and the weaponization of justice, and I don't think that's where people's heads are at. And I think we see more evidence of this every single day, and I'll explain in a minute. I think that the Democratic Party is in the midst of what is a massive shift where they have alienated a big part of their coalition base. I mean, if you look at both the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, they're both coalition parties, and these polls keep showing over and over again that Democrats are bleeding large, significant portions of their base. At the end of the day, what are people going to vote on? When you begin early voting in Pennsylvania, 91 days, and then other states will roll out in the days and weeks after with early voting. What are they going to be focused on? Are they going to focus on Biden's disastrous economy? 25% of Americans have had to forego meals, we learned last week. 66% of Americans are gasping for air financially. And that's the exact term that people are using. They're struggling because of the Biden economy, Biden policies, record interest rates, record inflation. American families paying $12,000 more on average for the same exact things they were buying just 4 short years ago. How does Joe Biden ever run on, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? The answer is he can't. I can't identify a single policy he has implemented that has made the lives of you and your family better. So what does he run on? How's this dismantled, reimagined, defund the police, no bail? How is that working out for people in small towns and big cities? Joe Biden has created the greatest national security risk that I can think of in the history of this country by allowing in his 11 million plus unvetted illegal immigrants, and so many coming from our top geopolitical foes. I have zero doubt at all. I'm 100% certain there are terror cells in this country because of Joe Biden. What did we learn last week? There are 8 people that we've identified with ties to ISIS allowed in the country because of Joe Biden's open borders. Why would that surprise anybody? It is a matter of if, it's not a matter of when, and I pray to God that I'm wrong. Not often you hear hosts say that they pray to God that they're wrong. They always want to be proven right. I don't want to be proven right. I want to be proven wrong. I don't want our country attacked again. And then now it seems inevitable. You had this illegal immigrant from El Salvador has been busted for the brutal 2023 rape and murder of a mother of 5. Her name is Rachel Morin on a Maryland hiking trail. The killer illegally crossed into the U.S. in February of 23 after he viciously murdered another young woman. At a press conference, the sheriff directed his anger towards illegal immigrant crime to the White House and Congress. We're 1,800 miles away from the southern border, and American citizens are not safe because of failed immigration policies. Trump's national press secretary referenced this murder. Say her name. And it's not Lincoln Riley, it's Laken Riley. Because one of Joe's illegal immigrant monsters raped and killed this mother of 5. What are people going to be